moving over to the AFC West, you get the reigning Super Bowl champs 2-time. We'll see if they can finally first to ever do a three-peat. They're going to come out with some big tiebreaker games in week 1 and week 2, both at home though, luckily.
Mm-hmm.
So they get Baltimore and Cincinnati at home. Those games will be big when it comes to week 18 when we're trying to figure out who's going to the playoffs. And then they have like we talked about, one of those 3-game stretches, but I actually think their 3-game stretch is more difficult than Baltimore's was, just because you get Cleveland, Pittsburgh, and Houston back to back to back. So
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's really good that they got back to back. They're two essentially most important games. I know San Francisco is a more anticipated game. Losing that game means nothing,
Right.
because seeding wise, Kansas City losing to Philly last year meant nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely nothing. It's just a very fun rating straw. But interconference games don't really mean much. But teams that are vying for the 1 seed, to me, it comes down to Cincinnati, Baltimore, Kansas City, and maybe Houston as a 1 seed.
Mm-hmm.
And you knock out 2 of those opponents at home early, you're feeling really good, and there's not like the urgency to overcome really towards the end of the year. But we'll just kind of see what happens. But really a stretch where they should start minimum 4-1.
Yeah.
And then they have a bye. And I know it's at San Francisco, but coming off a bye with Andy Reid, that's as good of a situation as you could have.
Right.
The only real thing is just kind of scheduling. I said it before, they're playing on every day of the week this year except for Tuesday. So a lot of maneuvering, a lot of short game stretches towards the end of the season. Again, 3 games in 10 days before their road game week 18. We typically don't see their starters playing week 18 because they're so good. But they're going to be right in the thick of things once again.
Yeah, and I don't see anybody obviously challenging them for the division.
No.
I think maybe if they wanted to play in week 18, it would be for, the number 1 seed so they can get a bye, play at home all the time. But the Raiders, winnable stretch, week 15 through 18. This team kind of feels, we've talked about it before, they kind of have a wide range of outcomes to me, because that roster is so good. Quarterback situation is so bad. You could win 5 games. You could win 9 games. It's just, to me, they're just so open, and they get to finish the season with, Atlanta will probably be the 1 seed in the NFC South. Then they get to play Jacksonville, who's probably going to be better than they were prior, but they can still, the Raiders are going to be good. So they're going to have a good defense. They're going to have, good athletes. They just got to get the ball to them. So,
yeah, I mean, like you hit the nail on the head. It's just hard to place this team record-wise right now. It'll probably be one of our least confident goes, but there's so many games that they can win. But there's also a lot of those games that I wouldn't be surprised at all if Denver were to beat them.
Yeah.
Or, Carolina. I know it's in, Vegas, but it's a dome. It's a neutral site stadium. Not as much as Dallas, but those typically aren't just, we're going to have a homestand.
Right.
Carolina goes in and beats them. I'm not going to be shocked, kind of thing. It just kind of depends on how things play out for them and how much their quarterbacks can overachieve. Because I don't know if Gardner Minshew, even though he was a big signing, will be the quarterback the whole year. Aiden O'Connell did okay enough. So if Gardner comes down with an injury and Aiden comes in and he's fine, he could probably keep the job.
Yeah. I mean, so we've had Aiden played last year for us, of course, with Jimmy G going down and stuff. I like Aiden, but we need more production when we have such good receivers. We now have an added tight end. We lose Josh Jacobs, be replaced with Zamir White, who had good production while he was gone. So it's we have good players everywhere. We just need to trust, I guess, the coaching staff and hope they can figure out how to win a few extra games than we're expected. And I don't know if they can. And like you said, the Carolina Panthers could beat us, but then also we could beat the Kansas City Chiefs. That's kind of the thing with
all
this.
On the board.
Yeah, that's kind of the thing with this team. It's exciting, of course, but I don't see us as a playoff team. It's exciting to go into every week wondering what's going to happen. Don't bet the Raiders very much this year because you just won't get them right. But yeah, if they go into Kansas City and win, okay, it's not surprising to me. because we've done it and we're pretty good at it actually. But if, like you said, Carolina could beat us, New Orleans could beat us somehow, and that's in a dome in New Orleans. So yeah,
Yeah, and then with Denver, be quick on them. They're one of the bottom teams this year. I think Sean Payton could have them overachieving, but it's just they're gonna be dogging um, a lot of games, a lot of situations, notable games that they have. Revenge game narrative with Sean Payton going back to New Orleans late in the year, and then the revenge game with Russell Wilson if he's the starter
right.
on a primetime game against Pittsburgh. So you know, I think this will be a growing year, transition year for them. They do have a really tough. So even if they do overachieve, I don't consider them a playoff caliber team because of their stretch towards the end of the year. Just 4 straight teams. Um,
Yeah, it's gonna be rough for sure going
exactly.
into
So
those places. Chargers, 6 home games in the last 8 weeks. That's always helpful. And then you've got them they travel the most in the NFL in 2024. That just normally that is a deterrent on if you're going to be able to, it's just the rest, the recouping of your body, things like that.
yeah,
And of course, they're on the West Coast and they're going to play some East Coast teams, so they're going to have to travel across the whole country. So
exactly. I mean, and then they have multiple stretches where very winnable games. But like you said, going to Atlanta a lot. If it was straight up head to head, I would like them, but that's on a short week because they play Monday Night Football. Then they got to go across the country to Atlanta. That's a droppable game. New England on the road, after a tough division game, you just never know.
yeah,
And so, back to back games that they end the year against teams that we don't expect in the playoffs that I wouldn't be surprised if they dropped. It's going to be interesting to see how the public, holds Harbaugh because his first year at Michigan, they were a bottom dweller team.
right, of course.
And then he put him to about 7-5, 8-4, and they're like, he's underachieving. And then doesn't make the playoff. What are we doing? And then he's getting embarrassed against Ohio State, and then he leaves it just in a perfect situation.
His 4 years, like he brought the squad in, he did the whole work for 4 years, and that's normally what happens. I actually think that this division is interesting because it's the opposite of the AFC East, where you have the fact that you have one team that you're pretty confident in, and then 3 teams that you have basically no idea. Very wide open to see who is the worst in this division rather than the best.
Yeah,
So,
and similar to what you said with the Raiders range of outcomes, if they're 6-11, not surprised. But if they're 10-7, like that's just something that I expect because I really do admire Jim Harbaugh and what he can do. But
right.
typically, he's had a year transition, and then he really comes into his own. This year, he didn't really have a ton of spending to do or
Yeah.
be able to do, but he did a really good job in the draft. And it just kind of depends on how quickly those things can translate over into winning success.
Right, of course.